This is another interesting example of some social commentary and also some natural commentary, all arising from the same species. So on the top right there, we see Audubon's original image of the Ivory-Billed Woodpecker. Here is that same image manipulated by a contemporary artist named Peter Edlund, who chose this woodpecker because, if you remember a few years ago in Texas, there was a black man who was dragged to death behind a truck by 3 white men. And one of those white men had a woodpecker tattoo on his arm. And so I'm sure most people probably don't know that reference at all. I sure didn't. But this artist picked up on that and changed the scenery into a much more menacing setting to kind of reflect on how menacing racism still is in our country. You know, even though we've come so far from the past, we still have it hanging around. So that's what he's trying to achieve with this. On the other hand, just 10 years after this piece was made, here we have another image of the Ivory-Billed Woodpecker for a very different reason. So this is around the time this was created as a cover for Birdwatcher's Digest by Julie Zickerfuss, right after people claimed that they found the Ivory-Billed Woodpecker again down the south. And so it's interesting to look at how this same image has been reworked from the past and how it can represent 2 very different things all within the same era of art. We also see a lot more photography than we used to. It was kind of a documentary type of thing before, taking pictures of families and of places. But now we have it used in a much more artistic setting much more often. And some of this can be very scientific in nature. So these were actually taken originally to just catalog what was in a museum's archives. This is actually a book that has recently come out called Egg and Nest. And I think what's great about this is that it is a very scientific commentary. So you look at the size of this enormous egg versus the little hummingbird egg, and you say scientifically, isn't it amazing that birds can be very related to each other and have this huge disparity? But also it's very artistic. It makes you think about things. It's very aesthetic. And I love how there are these stories attached to stuff that also has kind of a scientific commentary. The image on the right, by the way, is Anna's hummingbird nest that was made in a rope that was hanging on the yacht. I would never have recognized this as a hummingbird nest or a nest at all, but luckily there was a caption. So I think another one of the really important things about science or bird art today is money. And I don't mean this in a mercenary way at all, because I think it's great. A lot of art is being used right now to raise awareness and raise money for conservation and other environmental issues. And as a scientist, I know that it can be really hard to get people's attention, to change people's minds, and definitely to get money, to do research and to do these efforts. And so it's great that we can appeal to people's emotional and intellectual spirits by appealing to their aesthetic sense and then get them involved in that way. So these images are from a project called Birds, Bats, and Bees, where high-profile artists are asked to use recycled materials to make homes for said organisms, and then people pay lots of money for them, and that money goes into conservation effort, and they end up with this lovely piece of art that is also functional. They can put it out in their yard and track these animals. Bird art has also been used to capture the interest of the public and just kind of let them know that there are issues out there. So you slap a picture on a shirt or on a bumper sticker or on whatever sort of paraphernalia you want, and as soon as people see it, it kind of lodges in their brain. It's a great way to make a commercial. Also, we know for years both federal and state governments have sold stamps to hunters to try to raise money. Hunters don't have to buy this particular thing, but most of them do because they're very interested in conserving habitat for the birds that they want to hunt. So here we have marched through 30,000 years of, or more, of bird art. What can we say about all of this journey? Well, first of all, I think just solely looking at the bird art side of things, we see a general trend from art that involves birds as being kind of, far off things that happen to be there, to moving them ever closer to us. And so we go through this phase of metaphor and symbol, and then little by little the birds become more and more the focus of the pieces of art. And I think that kind of reflects our increasing knowledge of them as species and within the scientific realm and in the realm of nature, and our understanding of what they are and how we relate to them has really changed. And we've kind of brought them more internal to us as we've become more emotionally and intellectually involved with them. And that's really interesting. But who cares? What does any of this matter? Well, I think, first of all, this matters because if you look at the ubiquity of bird imagery across time, across space, we know that it's important. All these cultures have it, and they wouldn't all have it if it weren't somehow rooted in us to be interested in this species, to be interested in these species, in this organism. And I think it really appeals to us for all the reasons that anything could. You know, it has interesting behavior, they're beautiful to look at, they are in cool places, all sorts of things. They inspire us, they're like poetry. And so I think looking back throughout our own civilization at this progression of images, and also looking among civilizations and how similar and not similar they are, can be really informative in terms of just understanding how it is that we relate to the world around us and why, just on an anthropological level. But also I think you can kind of go a little more philosophical or a little more religious and think about, you know, how all these animals represent ways in which we have tried to understand our place in the universe. And both science and art do this. They try to understand what we're doing and why we're doing it and how it all works. And so all these pieces, the scientific advancements, the artistic pieces, are all different ways of trying to understand how stuff works and what it is that the purpose of life is. And I know that's pretty deep, but I think it is also true. And so when you look at all these pieces of art, you can understand how those fields fit together and how far we've come with all that knowledge. And you can also understand a little bit about how you think about these things. But perhaps more importantly, and most importantly, when you look at art and science, you have to understand that these are things that are set within any given culture. And so, of course, they're going to be influenced by that culture. You're going to ask particular questions and try to solve those questions in particular ways because you're affected by the culture around you. But at the same time, you're going to produce results that are going to affect the way you think, which is then going to change the culture around you. So it's this amazingly dynamic process. None of this is static. We've seen that. We've seen all these changes accumulate throughout time. And I think that's a very exciting thing to think about right now. So we're facing all these huge things that we have to do. And they involve this enormous confluence of science and of art. Not just bird art, but art in general that involves nature. And so here we are. We need to be greener. We need to have sustainable technology and development. We need to worry about climate change and do all these things to help us live better with the natural world and not make ourselves go extinct. And so you bring in people who are great artists and who can look at the landscape, who can look at architecture, who can look at things with a different perspective, and you join that with scientists who know a lot about this stuff. And you can actually come up with things that allow us to solve all of these goals that look kind of unapproachable at first glance, because we do have a lot on our plate. But all these innovations really come up when art and science work together, and I think that's very exciting, and it's also very hopeful. I'm very hopeful when I look at how all these things can help each other. So that is all I have to say about that. These are some great books I just thought I'd mention because I had a lot of fun reading them. So there you go, and I would be happy to take questions. Everyone close your eyes.